The noise in the cafeteria faded when Harper walked by. Everyone knew. She liked to pick someone new every week. Today her eyes landed on her. The quiet one. No friends, no words, just calm. Too calm. Harper dragged a trash can to her table. The sound scraped through the air like a warning. She leaned down, smirking. "Welcome to my table, sweetheart." Then crash. She flipped the entire thing onto the woman's food. Rotten leftovers and cold coffee splattered across her tray. Laughter erupted. The quiet inmate just sat there, still as stone. Then slowly she raised her eyes. Those weren't the eyes of someone scared. They were measuring, like she was memorizing every face in that room and deciding who goes first. For the first time in months, Harper took a step back. Something in her gut told her she just picked the wrong woman, and in less than 24 hours, everyone in that cafeteria would learn why. Stay with me until the end, because what this quiet inmate does next will make you question who the real monster is. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Now let's get started. The concrete walls of Northgate Women's Correctional Facility had seen their share of violence, but nothing quite like what was about to unfold. Most inmates arrived broken, desperate, or angry. Maya Thompson walked through those steel doors with something far more dangerous. Complete composure. She was 34 years old with dark skin that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Her movements were measured, deliberate, like someone who had calculated every step before taking it. The intake officer processing her paperwork barely looked up from his computer screen. Another drug charge. Another woman caught up in the system. Nothing unusual, nothing threatening. But if that officer had paid attention, really paid attention, he might have noticed something different about Maya Thompson. The way she scanned every corner of the room without moving her head. The way her breathing remained perfectly controlled despite being in one of the most notorious women's prisons in the state. The way her hands, though cuffed, remained relaxed at her sides, like she was simply waiting for the right moment. Maya had been many things in her life before those steel doors closed behind her. A daughter who disappeared at 15. A woman who learned survival in places most people couldn't imagine. A professional who worked in shadows for clients who paid well for problems to simply vanish. Now she was prisoner number 42291, and the next 18 months would be spent navigating a world that thought it knew violence. The cell block Maya was assigned to was ruled by fear, and everyone knew who controlled that fear. Harper Williams stood 6 feet tall with bleached blonde hair and arms covered in tattoos that told stories of every fight she'd won. She had been inside for 4 years on assault charges, but her real crime was the systematic terrorizing of anyone she deemed weak. Harper's crew of followers moved through the prison like sharks, sensing blood in the water. They decided who got protection and who became prey. They determined which inmates ate in peace and which ones went hungry. The guards looked the other way, because Harper's violence kept the other inmates in line, and that made their jobs easier. When word spread that fresh meat was coming to Cell Block C, Harper's interest was immediately piqued. New inmates meant new opportunities to establish dominance. Fresh faces meant fresh targets to remind everyone exactly who ran things behind these walls. The first time Harper laid eyes on Maya, she couldn't have been more pleased with what she saw. A quiet black woman who kept her head down and her mouth shut. Someone who moved through the corridors like she was trying to disappear into the concrete itself. This wasn't just easy prey. This was a gift wrapped in orange fabric. Maya's first week was exactly what she intended it to be. She spoke only when spoken to, kept her belongings organized with military precision, and observed everything without appearing to watch anything at all. She learned the guard rotation schedules, the blind spots in the camera coverage, and most importantly, she learned Harper's patterns. Her cellmate was a nervous woman named Lisa, who had been counting down the days until her release for 6 months. Lisa whispered constantly about the dangers of the place, about which inmates to avoid, about how to stay invisible until your time was up. "You seem different from the others who come through here," Lisa said one night after lights out. "Most new girls, they're either terrified or trying to act tough right away. You just seem like you're waiting for something." Maya stared at the ceiling where shadows from the corridor lights created geometric patterns on the concrete. "Patience is a skill most people never learn," she said softly. "But it's often the difference between living and dying." Lisa didn't understand what that meant, but something in Maya's voice made her feel both safer and more worried than she had felt in months. The prison cafeteria was where hierarchies were established and maintained. Harper held court at the center table, surrounded by her loyal followers who fed off her energy like parasites. Every meal was an opportunity to remind the population who was in charge, who deserved respect, and who deserved to be crushed. Maya entered the cafeteria each morning, carrying herself with the same quiet dignity she maintained everywhere else. She collected her tray without complaint, accepted whatever slop was being served that day, and found an empty table where she could eat in peace while cataloging every conversation, every interaction, every power dynamic playing out around her. The food was exactly what she expected from an underfunded correctional facility. Watery eggs that had been sitting under heat lamps for hours, toast that crumbled at the touch, coffee that looked like it had been brewing since the previous day. She ate without complaint because she had eaten far worse in far more dangerous places. For 2 weeks, this routine continued without incident. Maya blended into the background noise of prison life. Just another inmate serving her time and staying out of trouble. But Harper was growing restless. The new fish was too quiet, too calm, too comfortable. That kind of composure was dangerous, because it suggested the person possessed it had nothing to fear. In Harper's experience, people who had nothing to fear usually had very good reasons for their confidence, and that made them either valuable allies or threats that needed to be eliminated before they could establish themselves. The morning Harper decided to make her move. The atmosphere in the cafeteria felt different. Conversations were more subdued. Inmates glanced around nervously like animals sensing a predator nearby. Even the guards seemed more alert than usual, though none of them could have explained why. Maya sensed the change the moment she entered the room. Years of training had taught her to read environments, to feel the subtle shifts in energy that preceded violence. She collected her breakfast tray and began looking for a place to sit, already calculating exit routes and potential weapons within arm's reach. That's when Harper stood up from her usual table, her massive frame casting a shadow across half the cafeteria. Her crew flanked her immediately, grinning with anticipation as they prepared to witness another demonstration of their leader power. The room began to quiet as inmates realized something was about to happen. Maya found an empty table near the center of the room and sat down calmly. She had no intention of hiding in a corner or seeking protection near the guards. If confrontation was inevitable, she preferred to meet it on neutral ground where she had room to maneuver. Harper approached with deliberate slowness, savoring the attention her movement was generating throughout the cafeteria. Every eye was on her. Every conversation had stopped. Every inmate was waiting to see what would happen next. This was her stage, her moment to remind everyone why she was feared. Maya looked down at the mess covering her tray, then back up at Harper with an expression that never changed. The silence stretched like a wire pulled too tight. Other inmates held their breath, waiting for tears, for pleading, for the usual breakdown that followed one of Harper's displays. Instead, Maya reached into the pile of garbage and pulled out a piece of moldy bread. She examined it carefully, as if studying something fascinating. Then she set it aside and began methodically separating the trash from what remained of her actual food. Harper's smirk faltered. This wasn't the reaction she was used to. "Did you hear me, sweetheart?" I said. "Welcome to my table." "I heard you," Maya replied without looking up. Her voice was steady, almost conversational. "Thank you for the introduction." The response caught Harper completely off guard. Most inmates either cowered or tried to fight back immediately. This woman was doing neither. She was just sitting there cleaning garbage off her breakfast like it was the most normal thing in the world. "You think this is funny?" Harper's voice rose, drawing even more attention from across the cafeteria. "You think you can just ignore me?" Maya finally looked up, her dark eyes meeting Harper's pale blue ones directly. "I think you're trying very hard to get a reaction from me. I'm just wondering why." The honesty in her voice was unsettling. Harper had built her reputation on intimidation, on making people afraid to even look at her wrong. But this woman was looking at her like she was solving a puzzle, not facing down the most dangerous inmate in cell block C. One of Harper's crew, a wiry woman named Razor, stepped forward. "Harper, you want me to teach this one some manners?" Harper held up a hand, never breaking eye contact with Maya. This was personal now. The quiet woman's calm was eating away at her authority with every second that passed. "Nah, I got this one." Maya continued eating what remained of her breakfast, seemingly oblivious to the growing tension, but her awareness was absolute. She could feel the hostile stares, count the footsteps of approaching inmates, sense the guards starting to pay attention from their positions near the walls. "Stand up," Harper commanded, her voice dropping to a menacing growl. Maya chewed thoughtfully, swallowed, and then slowly rose to her feet. She was several inches shorter than Harper, but something in her posture made the difference seem irrelevant. "Is there something specific you need from me?" The question was asked with such genuine politeness that several inmates actually gasped. No one talked to Harper like she was just another person having a normal conversation. Harper's face flushed red with anger and embarrassment. The woman's calm was making her look front of everyone and weak in a place like this. Perception was everything, and right now she was being perceived as someone who couldn't even intimidate a quiet new fish. "Yeah, there's something I need," Harper snarled, stepping closer until she was towering over Maya. "I need you to understand how things work around here. See, I run this block. That means everything that happens here goes through me, including where someone like you gets to sit." Maya nodded slowly as if considering this information. "That sounds like a lot of responsibility. It must be exhausting to manage everyone's daily activities." Again, the response was so unexpected that Harper found herself momentarily speechless. The woman wasn't mocking her, wasn't being sarcastic. She sounded genuinely sympathetic to the burden of leadership. But Harper's crew was getting restless. They fed off their leader energy, and right now that energy was building toward something explosive. Razor cracked her knuckles, eager to please her boss and put on a show for the growing crowd. "Harper," Razor whispered, "just give me the word. I'll make her understand." Maya's eyes shifted slightly to take in Razor's position, then moved to catalog the locations of the other crew members. Her breathing remained controlled, her hands relaxed at her sides. Years of training had taught her that violence usually announced itself through subtle changes in body language, long before the first punch was thrown. "You know what I think?" Harper said, her voice getting louder with each word. "I think you're one of those inmates who think she's better than everyone else. One of those college girls who got caught doing something stupid and now thinks prison rules don't apply to her." Maya considered this assessment carefully. "I think we all make choices that lead us to unexpected places. I'm just trying to serve my time quietly." "Quietly," Harper repeated, her voice dripping with contempt. "Yeah, I noticed how quiet you are. Too quiet. Makes people nervous when someone's that quiet. Makes them wonder what you're hiding." The cafeteria had gone completely silent now. Even conversations at tables across the room had stopped as inmates sensed something significant was building. The guards were starting to move closer, but they weren't intervening yet. They had learned that sometimes it was better to let these situations play out rather than escalate them prematurely. Maya finished the last bite of her salvaged breakfast and set her plastic spoon down with deliberate care. "I'm not hiding anything. I'm just someone who prefers to observe before acting." "Observe what?" Harper demanded. Maya's eyes swept the cafeteria slowly, taking in every face, every posture, every subtle alliance and enmity on display. When her gaze returned to Harper, there was something different in it. Something that made the gang leader's stomach tighten with an emotion she hadn't felt in years. "Everything," Maya said simply. The single word carried weight that Harper couldn't identify, but definitely felt. It was the tone of someone who had seen things, done things, survived things that most people couldn't imagine. It was the voice of someone who had learned that the most dangerous predators were often the ones who remained perfectly still until the moment came to strike. Harper's instincts, honed by years of prison violence, were screaming warnings she couldn't quite interpret, but she was the queen of Cell Block C. Queens don't back down from challenges, especially not from some quiet woman who acted like she was above it all. "You know what happens to inmates who think they're smarter than everyone else?" Harper asked, leaning down from Maz until her face was inches. Mia met her gaze without flinching. "I imagine they usually underestimate the people around them." The response was delivered with such calm certainty that Harper felt a chill run down her spine. This woman was unafraid, and she was confident in a way that suggested she had very good reasons to be, but there was no backing down now. Not with every eye in the cafeteria watching. Not with her reputation on the line. Not with her crew expecting her to handle this quiet threat decisively. Harper drew back her fist, putting every ounce of her considerable weight behind a punch designed to end the conversation permanently. It was the kind of blow that had established her dominance over dozens of inmates. the kind that sent a clear message about what happened to anyone who dared challenge her authority. Maya saw the attack coming from the moment Harper's shoulder tensed. 15 years of training in techniques most people had never heard of had given her an understanding of violence that went far beyond street fighting or prison brawling. The punch was powerful but clumsy, thrown with emotion instead of skill. What happened next would be whispered about in every cell block for months to come. Time seemed to slow as Maya's body moved with fluid precision that defied explanation. Her left hand came up in a gentle arc, redirecting Harper's massive fist just enough to send it harmlessly past her head. At the same moment, her right palm struck forward with surgical accuracy, connecting with a pressure point just below Harper's ribcage. The technique was called silent thunder. Applied correctly, it could disrupt breathing and drop someone twice Maya's size without causing permanent damage. Applied with full force, it could stop a heart completely. Maya held back. Harper's eyes went wide as the air exploded from her lungs. Her massive frame folded in on itself as she dropped to her knees, gasping like a fish pulled from water. The cafeteria fell into absolute silence. Even the guards froze, unable to process what they had just witnessed. Razor and the rest of Harper's crew stood paralyzed, watching their invincible leader writhing on the concrete floor. The woman who had ruled through fear and brutality for 4 years was on her knees in front of an inmate who looked like she should be teaching Sunday school somewhere. Maya looked down at Harper with something that might have been pity. "I asked you to let me eat in peace," she said, her voice still calm and controlled. "Violence was never necessary. The aftermath was swift and decisive." Guards rushed in with restraints and medical attention, but the damage to Harper's reputation was already complete. Word spread through every cell block within hours. The Queen of Northgate had been dethroned by a quiet woman who moved like shadow and struck like lightning. Maya was placed in solitary confinement as standard procedure. But even the guards treated her differently now. They had seen inmates fight before, witnessed brutal beatdowns and desperate struggles. But they had never seen anything like what happened in that cafeteria. That wasn't fighting. That was something else entirely. The solitary cell was 8 by 10 ft of concrete and steel. Most inmates emerged from isolation, broken, their minds shattered by the crushing loneliness. Maya used the time to meditate, to center herself for what she knew would come next. Harper's humiliation couldn't be allowed to stand in a place like this. Respect was currency, and Maya had just bankrupted the most powerful woman in the prison. When Maya emerged from solitary 3 days later, the atmosphere had shifted completely. Conversations stopped when she passed. Inmates who had never spoken to her before nodded with cautious respect. Others watched from a distance, trying to understand how someone so unremarkable could possess such devastating capability. Lisa was waiting in their cell, her face a mixture of relief and terror. "They're saying you killed Harper with 1 hit. Is that true? They're saying you're some kind of secret government agent or something." Maya sat on her narrow bunk and began folding her few belongings with the same precise movements she brought to everything. "People say many things in places like this. Most of it isn't worth repeating. But what you did to Harper, that wasn't normal. Nobody moves like that. Nobody hits like that." Maya paused in her folding, her eyes distant with memories of a different life. Training sessions that lasted until dawn. Missions that required her to become someone else entirely. A world where her skills were used to eliminate problems that governments couldn't solve through conventional means. "I was trained to protect people who couldn't protect themselves," she said finally. "Sometimes that training becomes useful in unexpected ways." Lisa stared at her cellmate with new understanding. "What kind of training?" "The kind most people hope they never need." The next morning brought a different kind of tension to cell block C. Harper had been transferred to the medical wing, officially for observation, but everyone knew the real reason. She couldn't show her face in general population after what had happened. Her crew had scattered like leaves in the wind, aligning themselves with other power structures or trying to become invisible until the situation stabilized. Maya walked to breakfast with the same measured steps she always used, but now those steps carried weight. Inmates parted before her like water, their eyes following her movement with a mixture of fear and curiosity. Some looked at her with the kind of respect usually reserved for lifers who had survived decades behind bars. The cafeteria felt different without Harper's presence. Conversations were more relaxed. Laughter came easier. And several inmates who had been living in constant fear finally seemed able to breathe. Maya found an empty table and sat down to eat, her breakfast in the peace she had originally requested. But peace was a luxury that rarely lasted long in places like this. As Maya ate her eggs methodically, she noticed movement at the edges of her vision. New faces, inmates she didn't recognize from cell block C. Women with dead eyes and scarred, hands who moved with the careful precision of predators, sizing up potential prey. Word of what happened to Harper had reached beyond Northgate's walls in the complex network of connections that linked correctional facilities across the state. Maya's name was being whispered in maximum security cells and minimum security dormitories alike. The quiet woman who had taken down the infamous Harper Williams with a single strike. That kind of reputation attracted attention from people who made Harper look like an amateur. Professional criminals who had been inside so long they had forgotten what the outside world looked like. Women who killed for money, for territory, for the simple pleasure of watching life drain from someone's eyes. 3 of them approached Maya's table as she finished her breakfast. The leader was a tall woman with graying hair and arms covered in tattoos that told stories of violence spanning decades. They called her Mother Death, and her reputation preceded her through every facility in the state correctional system. "Mind if we sit?" Mother Death asked, though it wasn't really a question. Her 2 companions flanked Mia's table, blocking potential escape routes with practiced efficiency. Maya looked up from her tray, her expression unchanged. "The cafeteria belongs to everyone. Please join me." Mother Death smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Polite, I like that. Shows respect for your elders." She settled into the chair across from Maya, her movements deliberate and threatening. "We heard about your little disagreement with Harper. Impressive work. It was a misunderstanding that got out of hand." "Misunderstanding?" Mother Death laughed, a sound like gravel being poured into a cement mixer. "Honey, I've been in this game for 30 years. I know the difference between a misunderstanding and a professional hit." Maya set down her plastic spoon and folded her hands in her lap. Years of training had taught her to recognize genuine threats, and this woman represented danger on a level that Harper never could have imagined. "I'm not looking for trouble. I just want to serve my time quietly." "See, that's where we have a problem," Mother Death replied, leaning forward across the table. "Someone with your particular set of skills doesn't get to just serve time quietly. Word gets around. People start asking questions. Pretty soon you're either working for someone or you're dead." The conversation was drawing attention from across the cafeteria. Guards were starting to move closer, sensing tension, but not yet understanding its source. Other inmates were clearing out nearby tables, recognizing the signs of something serious about to unfold. "What kind of work are you referring to?" Maya asked calmly. Mother Death's smile widened. "The kind that pays well and requires discretion. See, there are certain individuals in certain facilities who have become problems for certain organizations. Problems that need to be solved by someone with your obvious talents." Maya understood immediately. She was being recruited as an assassin. Her demonstration against Harper had advertised capabilities that made her valuable to criminal organizations operating within the prison system. They wanted to use her skills to eliminate rivals, silence witnesses, or simply send messages through violence. "I'm not interested in that kind of work anymore," Maya said firmly. "Anymore?" Mother Death's eyes lit up with predatory interest. "So, you admit you've done this kind of work before?" Maya realized her mistake immediately. In trying to deflect the offer, she had confirmed suspicions about her background. Now there was no pretending to be just another inmate caught up in the system. "Everyone has a past," Maya said carefully. "Mine is behind me." Mother Death laughed again. "Sweetheart, the past is never behind us in here. It's what defines us, what makes us useful or dangerous. And you, my dear, are extremely dangerous." One of Mother Death's companions, a muscular woman with dead eyes and scars across her knuckles, leaned in closer. "We've done our research on you, Maya Thompson. Amazing how someone with your skills ends up in minimum security on a drug charge. Almost like someone wanted you here for a specific purpose." The implication hung in the air like poison gas. Maya felt the weight of eyes watching from every corner of the cafeteria. Guards, inmates, even kitchen staff were paying attention now, sensing that something significant was happening at the center table. "I think this conversation is over," Mia said, starting to rise from her seat. Mother Death's hand shot out and grabbed Mia's wrist with surprising strength. "Sit down, honey. We're not finished talking." The contact was a mistake. Ma's training kicked in automatically, her body responding to the threat before her mind could intervene. Her free hand moved in a swift, precise motion that struck pressure points along Mother Death's forearm. The grip loosened immediately as feeling left the older woman's fingers. But Mother Death wasn't Harper. She had survived 3 decades in maximum security facilities by being faster, smarter, and more ruthless than everyone around her. Even as her right hand went numb, her left was already moving, pulling a sharpened piece of metal from her sleeve. The weapon flashed toward Mia's throat with lethal intent. What happened next would determine whether Maya Thompson lived to see another day, or whether her secret would die with her in a pool of blood on the cafeteria floor. Maya's body moved, like liquid mercury, flowing around the blade's trajectory with movements that seemed to bend the laws of physics. The sharpened metal whistled past her throat, missing by millimeters as she twisted away from Mother Death's strike. Her counterattack was instantaneous and devastating. Her elbow drove upward into Mother Death's wrist with surgical precision, shattering bone with an audible crack that echoed through the suddenly silent cafeteria. The makeshift weapon clattered across the concrete floor as Mother Death screamed in pain and rage. But Maya wasn't finished. Her left hand struck 3 pressure points along Mother Death's neck in rapid succession, a technique she had learned from masters who understood the human body as a collection of vulnerabilities waiting to be exploited. Mother Death's eyes rolled back as her nervous system shut down, and she collapsed face first onto the table. The entire exchange lasted less than 3 seconds. 3 seconds that transformed Maya from a quiet inmate trying to serve her time into something far more dangerous in the eyes of everyone watching. Mother Death's 2 companions rushed forward simultaneously, their movements coordinated like wolves attacking wounded prey. The first swung a heavy padlock wrapped in a sock, the improvised weapon cutting through the air toward Maya's skull, with enough force to crack bone. Maya ducked low and swept the attacker's legs, sending her crashing into a nearby table that collapsed under the impact. Before the woman could recover, Maya was on her feet again, pivoting to face the second threat. This one was smarter, more patient. She circled Maya like a predator, a razor blade gleaming between her knuckles as she looked for an opening. Her movement spoke of someone who had killed before, who understood that rushing in was how you ended up like her unconscious companions. "You're fast," the woman said, her voice carrying the flat affect of someone who had long ago stopped feeling anything during violence. "But speed only gets you so far in here. Eventually, you have to sleep. Eventually, you have to let your guard down." Maya remained perfectly still, her breathing controlled, her mind calculating angles and distances with mathematical precision. "You're right," she said calmly. "But not today." The woman lunged forward with the blade extended, aiming for Maya's midsection in a strike designed to open arteries and end the fight quickly. Maya sidestepped the attack and grabbed the woman's wrist, applying pressure to nerve clusters that forced her fingers to release the razor. Her knee came up into the attacker's solar plexus with enough force to lift her off her feet. The woman doubled over, gasping for air that wouldn't come, and Maya's palm strike to the back of her neck sent her into unconsciousness before she hit the floor. The cafeteria had erupted into complete chaos. Inmates were screaming, running for exits, overturning tables as they tried to get away from the violence. Guards were shouting orders and rushing toward the center of the disturbance with riot gear and restraints. Maya stood in the middle of it all, her orange jumpsuit torn but otherwise unharmed, surrounded by 3 unconscious women who had underestimated what they were dealing with. Her breathing was steady, her hands relaxed at her sides, like she had just finished a light workout rather than a fight for her life. Sergeant Rodriguez, the head of security for the women's facility, arrived with a team of guards in full tactical gear. He had seen prison fights before, witnessed brutal beatdowns and desperate struggles, but the scene in front of him defied explanation. Time seemed to freeze as Maya's reflexes took over completely. The sharpened metal whistled past her throat by mere millimeters as she twisted with fluid precision. Her counter was immediate and devastating. Her elbow drove into Mother Death's wrist with surgical accuracy, the crack of breaking bone echoing through the silent cafeteria. The weapon clattered across concrete as Mother Death screamed. But Maya's training had taken full control now. 3 precise strikes to pressure points along the woman's neck sent her crashing face first onto the table, unconscious before she knew what hit her. The 2 companions rushed forward like predators sensing wounded prey. The first swung a padlock wrapped in cloth toward Mia's skull with bone-crushing force. Maya dropped low, swept the attacker's legs, and sent her crashing through a nearby table that splintered under the impact. The second was smarter, circling with a razor blade gleaming between her knuckles. "Speed only gets you so far," she hissed, moving like someone who understood killing. "Eventually, you have to sleep." Maya remained perfectly still, calculating every angle. "You're right, but not today." The blade thrust came fast and lethal, aimed at arteries that would end everything quickly. Maya sidestepped, grabbed the wrist, and applied pressure to nerve clusters that forced the weapon to drop. Her knee lifted the attacker off her feet, and a palm strike to the neck sent her into darkness. The cafeteria erupted into complete chaos. Inmates screamed and ran for exits while guards rushed in with riot gear. Maya stood in the center of it all, breathing steady, hands relaxed, surrounded by 3 unconscious women who had learned too late what they were dealing with. Sergeant Rodriguez arrived with tactical teams, staring at a scene that defied everything he thought he knew about prison violence. This wasn't a brawl or a gang fight. This was something else entirely, something that belonged in movies, not in his facility. As guards moved in with restraints, Maya offered no resistance. She had done what was necessary to survive, nothing more. But word would spread through every correctional facility in 3 states. The quiet woman who had taken down Mother Death and her crew without breaking a sweat. Maya Thompson was placed in maximum security isolation. But her legend was just beginning in the complex hierarchy of prison power. She had just announced herself as something beyond what anyone had imagined possible. Sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one who never wanted to fight at all, and sometimes when you pick on the quiet one, you discover that silence isn't weakness, it's patience. And when that patience runs out, you learn why some people choose to stay quiet in the first place. Maya served the remainder of her sentence without another incident. Not because she couldn't handle whatever came next, but because after that day in the cafeteria, nobody was foolish enough to test her.